increased 12%, and Cato peak rate increased by 20%, and through yields improved by 20%. Altogether, the team accomplished a 25% reduction in COGS over the quarter, and we are on track to achieve steady state cost targets over the next 12 months. And going forward for the rest of the year, the priority one is yielding cost for the 4680 program as we steadily ramp production ahead of Cybertruck next year.
Thank you very much. The next question is, what do you anticipate 2023 automotive gross margins ex credits will be at the company's current pricing levels?
Yeah, I can start off on this one. This is a difficult environment to make a projection like this. There's a lot of macro uncertainty. There's also headwinds and tailwinds. And, this is basically a question I think that's asking about our viewpoint on where costs will go. And within costs, there's a set of costs in which we do control, a set of costs in which we're kind of subject to what's going on in the macro world. Within the bucket of things we control, the most of the cost down that we're working on is around ramping our Austin factory, stabilizing that, and then doing the cost optimization work once we get to our intended volumes there. And a part of the cost journey in the Austin factory is, as Drew mentioned, the 4680 cell, which is an input into our Austin COGS. And so, as the 4680 program improves over the course of the year on cost, as Drew mentioned, and then the non-cell portion of the factory improves, we see a pretty good trajectory in the Austin facility. But a similar story exists in the Berlin factory. It does not have 4680 as an input, but for that factory, the journey to complete localization is still ongoing. And so over the course of this year, as volume increases, more localization occurs, we do see a good path to cost reduction in the Berlin factory as well. In existing factories too, we talk about this on every call, so I don't need to rehash it, but the expectation is that every existing factory improves all of their key metrics, and we continue to see the progress there. There's also a handful of other costs in which we have influence, but the philosophy here is that we're aggressively going across every cost bucket that we can. Within the world that we don't control, the two major costs there being logistics, which fortunately is moving in our favor. And I think our supply chain team has done a great job both on logistics optimization and taking advantage of reduced spot rates where they can. So thank you to our supply chain team. And then there's the commodities world, which has been a huge pain point in our cost structure over the last, say, 2 years or so. And we're still kind of at the maximum of pain for commodities in our cost structure. It kind of maxed out in the second half of last year. We did start to see in Q1 a little bit of improvement. We think there'll be a little bit more improvement in Q2. But
lithium has dropped a lot. It's worth mentioning that the price of lithium has dropped significantly.
Yeah, and that's the piece that we expect to see more impact from in Q2. And generally, as a company, we do expect commodity prices to come down and have a more meaningful impact in the second half of the year.
Yeah.
So, this is our approach. How that nets out, there's just a lot of risk, and we'll have to see how the year progresses.
Thank you. The next question is, how has global order intake tracked since the most recent round of price cuts?
I think the overall thing we can say is that orders are in excess of production.
Thank you. And maybe the last question from investors. Can you give updated specs and pricing for Cybertruck and any new features that will make it to production?
Well, I think we'll save that for the Cybertruck handover, which will hopefully be around the end of Q3 this year. And one thing I am confident of saying is that it's an incredible product. It's a Hall of Famer, I think. And a product like this only comes along once in a long while. So people will not be disappointed at all. It's amazing.
Great. Thank you very much. And let's go to analyst questions. We'll start with Alex Potter from Piper Sandler. Alex, go ahead and unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So first question was on Lathrop. Obviously, it's great to see the growth there. Just wondering when you think that facility might be closer to full utilization. Are you just sort of deliberately working your way up the S curve there? Demand obviously isn't the limitation. So what are the steps, I guess, to unlocking full utilization there?
Sure. There are some classic, factory ramp aspects of what's going on in Lathrop. We actually had 2 phases of the capex there. We phased some of the general assembly parts of the facility, but in addition, we also have ramps with our suppliers that we are following. So both on the cell side and on the power electronic side, and we will see that unlock in the latter half of this year with both of those inputs. So the overall facility was phased, with the second phase of capex coming online towards the end of this year.
Okay, great. And then I guess my second question is on your ability to serve other markets out of Shanghai. Obviously, the facility in Berlin should be opening up your ability to, I guess, allocate more vehicles to Southeast Asia, Australia, other areas. I'm just wondering what other regions you think you're maybe not yet serving effectively. What are your timelines for addressing some of those gaps in your regional exposure? Thanks.
Yeah, that's a good question, because there are still many parts of the world that we do not yet serve, with respect to vehicles especially. So we do expect to open up new markets around the world. And while those markets are not necessarily individually gigantic, they do add up to, if you add up a whole bunch of markets, they do collectively some